Hello everyone. This is how to do the cell membrane captions worksheet, except it's really notes. It's not a worksheet. But oh well, it was a good name. So there are three types of passive transport. In other words, passive, it does not require any energy. And the first type of passive transport is diffusion. This picture shows diffusion through a cell membrane. So this is the cell membrane, or lipid bilayer, or phospholipid bilayer. It's all the same. And this is a phospholipid. There's the phosphorus, the head, and there's the lipid, the tail. Notice there's a layer here and a layer here. That's why it's a bilayer, bi meaning two. Now, you'll notice that the little molecules here are more concentrated outside the cell than they are inside the cell. So outside the cell, it's hypertonic, inside it's hypotonic. Therefore, they'll move from high concentration to low concentration because that's the natural way that molecules will spread out if you're not using energy. So spreading out from high to low concentration, it's passive transport with no energy, and this happens with small molecules like oxygen and water, which can actually pass through the cell membrane. You see it just pushing those phospholipids aside and squishing through. Please write everything you see here. The second type of passive transport is osmosis, which is the diffusion of water across the membrane. Remember, you have to have diffusion, water, and a semipermeable membrane. So here is the semipermeable membrane, or the phospholipid bilayer. There are more water molecules and fewer solute molecules on this side. And there are more solute molecules and fewer water molecule on this side. Now remember, the water can pass through this membrane, but the solute is too big. Remember, the solute is the thing that gets dissolved in the water. So the water will move from where there's lots of water to where there's less water, from high water to low water. So therefore, water will undergo osmosis from left to right. That's the net movement of water. Now it says net movement because actually maybe two water molecules go to the right and maybe one comes back to the left. But that's the same thing as one going to the right, right? So there's a net or overall movement of water to the right. Now, the solute is hypotonic. There's a low amount of solute. There's a high amount of water. Then on this side, there's a high amount of solute, and solute is hypertonic. This is passive transport. There's no energy needed. The membrane is selectively permeable. In other words, some things can pass through and some cannot. In this case, the water can pass through, but the solute cannot. And this solute could be sugar, it could be salt, it could be anything that's dissolved in the water. The third type of passive transport is facilitated diffusion. If there's a molecule that's just too big to fit through the semipermeable membrane, the phospholipid bilayer, then it will need to go through a gate, sort of. The gate is a channel protein, or a protein channel. I guess the protein that makes it is the channel protein, and the tunnel it makes is a protein channel. Anyway, facilitated diffusion, facilitated means it's helped. So diffusion is helped by a large opening. So this large molecule can get into the cell. And this is passive transport. Once again, no energy is needed. It's just allowed in through this larger gate instead of having to go in the chain link fence and through the links like this one is right here. You got to be pretty small, like a bird, to go through the chain link fence. If you're big like a dog, you have to go through the gate. Silly analogy, but maybe it works. There are also three main types of active transport. Remember, active transport uses energy, specifically ATP energy. ATP is adenosine triphosphate. It's the energy molecule. It's kind of like a molecule that acts like a rechargeable battery. So We have, first of all, molecular transport. This is when you use a protein pump to pump the molecule where you want it to go. And you do that when there's more molecules already inside the cell or outside, and you're going to add even more. So here we've already got a hypertonic solution down here and hypo outside. So naturally, the solute is going to try to move out of the cell, not in. But let's say maybe this is sugar molecules and you want more sugar. Well, then this protein pump will get that sugar molecule and pump and push it in to where there are already lots of molecules. And that's why it needs energy, because it's going from low to high concentration, which is not natural. The next two types of active transport are endocytosis and exocytosis. So here we have endocytosis. Notice how two little pseudopods, false feet, wrap around the particle of food, for example. They seal together and make a little vacuole or a vesicle, and then it pinches off and goes floating into the cell. That is endocytosis. Endo, enter, cyto, cell, entering the cell. Then, if you have a large molecule or lots of small molecules that you want to get rid from the cell, then you use exocytosis. Exo, exit, cyto, cell, exiting the cell. So we have a vesicle or vacuole that attaches to the inside of the cell membrane, seals with it, and then breaks open. Notice only the stuff in the vesicle escapes. The rest of the cell stays inside the cell and goes out. Notice waste, large molecules. These are the type of things that the cell pushes out and gets rid of. Both endocytosis and exocytosis are active transport. They use that ATP energy to make it happen. Now, a specific example of molecular transport is the sodium-potassium pump. So this is a special protein pump that has a name to it. And this protein pump pumps in potassium and pumps out sodium. So that's why it's the sodium-potassium pump. And it's kind of cool. Your cells need to get rid of sodium. And so it takes in 3 sodiums and pushes them out. But your cells need more potassium. So it takes 2 potassiums and pushes them in. Notice that it needs ATP, so this is active transport. And that's what happens. It just pumps out the sodium and pumps in the potassium. And the same pump does both. Finally, let's label the parts of the cell membrane. So in this diagram, this is the outside of the cell and this is inside the cell. You can tell because these little carbohydrate chains are sticking out on the outside. Those are receptors, like little antennae. They receive messages, such as when a hormone goes through your bloodstream and gets to the cell, they can receive the message from that hormone telling the cell to become active or to slow down. And so these carbohydrate chains receive the messages. Then this is the cell membrane or the phospholipid bilayer or the lipid bilayer. And specifically, here's the phosphorus head and the lipid tail. And there's 2 layers. Here is a protein channel going through. Here are some more proteins that might be channels and might be holding onto the carbohydrate chains and might be doing who knows what. So the cell membrane is actually way more complicated than this. Fortunately, this is as deep as we are going. So hopefully that will help you understand a little bit better.